And when you see on the air, you're on the air, okay?
Mm-hmm. And welcome to the Oracle Vortex of Enlightenment. This is Sal Monaco, flying solo tonight. I decided to give it a try and see if I can actually pull off an entire show without a co-host or a Zoom guest. I want to welcome everyone to the show and say happy holidays. As everyone knows, I just had a birthday and have turned 55, so I'm now old enough to be on the order off of the 55 plus menu at Denny's. And I want to do a shout out to my lovely girlfriend Laura, who today is her birthday, which is amazing that we're 3 days apart and a couple of years. But I had a really wonderful several days. I was taken out to dinner 3 times, given 2 birthday cakes, and given a really great home cooked meal. Had a good Thanksgiving. So yeah, it was a pretty good birthday weekend. And when you're my age, or actually, let me take that back. At any age, if you're lucky enough to have friends who are going to go out of their way to do as many birthday things as my friends do, then you know you're pretty lucky, especially with how old I'm getting. I mean, I know in the long run, 55 isn't old, and I don't act my age anyway, except physically, because although I have the mind of a 20-something, I have the body of a 55-year-old. And believe me, it starts to show every day. But yeah, special thanks to all the people that gave me such a great birthday. Amanda, Mary Beth, Jen, Heather, Dave, the other Dave, so Dennis, who also shares my birthday, and Lori for the wonderful cakes she got me. Unfortunately, I may end up putting on weight this season again. It's hard to lose when I was sick for 2.5 weeks and couldn't go to therapy, couldn't exercise, and it's just been really weird. Maybe it's because of the weird weather. I don't know. But I also, for those of you who don't know, and I doubt there's anybody on here that doesn't, I also won my 3rd award for my short film. Now, the short film was actually, like my first short film, it was scenes from our movie taken out and stitched together into one film, which could probably be done a lot with my first feature. I mean, I always said it looked like a bunch of short films strung together. I mean, it had a flowing plot, but I could easily take it apart and make more short films and use footage that hadn't been seen in the movie and such, which I may end up doing. But yeah, to all my friends at Buffalo Movie and Video, you guys are wonderful. And to everyone who voted for me, thank you. For the last few years, my film career has continued to improve. 3 awards, 1 appearance in Buffalo Dreams Film Festival, Buffalo Fantasy Dreams Film Festival. I'll get it right. And being mentioned in a book. So I think that if we continue to move forward in a positive way, good things will continue to happen. I will be showing you the film now. For those of you who haven't seen my features, you'll be seeing what is one of the best sequences from the film. mainly because it was shot by the great Dan Monroe. And it stars one of the great actors of today, Mr. Russell Jaffe. And, Robert Story and Miss Nikki Munns. Yeah. Hi to you too, Mick. Oh, boy. Buffalo Fantastic. Isn't it Buffalo Dreams? That's the new version, Mick. Buffalo Fantastic Film Festival. Before it was Buffalo Dreams Fantasy Film Festival. Anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, my film that won me my third award, The Firing Sequence.
That's not the line.
You know, I thought it was the emotion that was important.
The script again?
Yes, it's...
Let's go to page 17.
Ready? Give me my cue.
Zany Coffee is cool, but their poetry readings go on forever.
I know, and they haven't gotten much better.
Hey, does that skinny bald guy still show up? What a stiff.
Dr. Langham,
I guess so. He whistles his S's a lot.
he doesn't moderate much anymore, and there's not much he doesn't do.
That's not the line, and you're not acting, you're imitating.
Professor Reeves!
Look, you can't keep thinking that acting is pretending to be some actress that you admire.
It could be.
You might as well be doing impressions. Look, you have to connect to your emotions.
Help me. I don't want to be working in a radio station the rest of my life.
What do you connect to? What puts you into a real fantasy? Like you want to be someone else. Who?
Star Trek. Star Trek. Yeah, Star Trek.
Look, get yourself together. We're going to do something a little different. Okay? Here's what we're going to do. A scene from Star Trek.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, what scene do you want to be an actor in?
Original series from The Naked Time. Spock has a disease that makes him emotional. Kirk needs him to figure out how to start the warp drive cold. But Spock just wants to figure out his feelings.
And they end up slapping each other, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
Well, let's do that scene.
But I don't know if I remember all the lines.
Come on, don't worry about it. That's never stopped you before.
I guess.
Wait a minute. Let's do this right.
Wow. But the scene is between two men.
Perfect. I don't want you to act like a man, and I don't want you to act like Spock. What I want you to do is I want you to be in Spock's situation.
And you're gonna do Kirk.
I'm going to do Kirk, but I'm going to do myself, but in Kirk's situation. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, let's begin. Spock, we need your help.
My mother. I never got to tell my mother I loved her.
Spock, we need your help. We only have a few minutes.
This has been so hard for her. The only human on a planet where emotions are uncouth.
Spock, we have to start the engines cold. We need your help or we'll explode.
I grew up under their customs. They made me. I made me. I was ashamed of my own human blood. Captain! Our friendship. When I think of our friendship, I am ashamed.
Spock, we need the firing sequence. We have to start the firing sequence.
My whole life, I've had to hide my true feelings. The love.
The firing
The
sequence!
humiliation. Ugh!
Now you're getting the idea.
Yeah.
There you go. Good, good.
And we're back. That was The Firing Sequence, which was the film that won me my 3rd short film award. And probably some of the best work in my original feature. I could do a film just on what I went through to make that first feature. It was a lot of craziness, but as you know, I recently attended LilCon with my good friend Mark Miller, who runs the con, and he and his staff did an amazing job this year. I just wanted to show a few tidbits from the convention that I think everyone will like. Just to give you a taste of how good this convention really was. Now, first off, I interviewed one of the cosplayers who was showing me the device he used to change his voice. Everything here is with the permission of the people, just so everyone knows. Because I know people out there have said different. One second. Tell us what the name of the character is.
I am a tech freak from Warhammer 40K.
Okay. How long did it take you to make this outfit?
It's been in the works for the last 5 years.
Wow. Must have cost a lot.
Actually, no. The total was like 80, 90 bucks.
For making a handmade one, that's pretty good.
Yes.
Yes. And what are you using for the voice?
Just a cheap voice modulator I found on Amazon.
Very cool. All right, thank you.
No problem.
And we're back. That was a very interesting cosplay done by a cosplayer at the con. He did not give his name. But I think it was an amazing piece, and it goes to show you the creativity of cosplayers. Now, coming up next, I actually attended the Transformers trivia, and the person running it, he had a Optimus Prime bot. So I took a little footage of it to show you guys. I didn't win the Transformers trivia, but I did do pretty good. Better than I thought I was going to, considering there were a lot of the shows I hadn't watched. So here's the Transformers bot. Ladies and gentlemen, Optimus Prime. Can you make him transform? Very cool.
Yeah. I went again with her, and then a couple other times went up to her. Third time down, that's super cool. So.
Very cool.
I'll definitely try to check it out.
So, yeah, the Optimus Prime bot, which I thought was really cool. For those of you out there that are Transformer fans, they did a really good job with the Transformers trivia. And next, I have a little tidbit with my friend and co-host, Dave the Iceman Ennis. There was a lot of lightsabers being tossed around throughout the weekend, so he wanted to show that even he, who rarely does cosplay, and his Halloween costumes have always been makeshift. Ladies and gentlemen, David Ennis.
be here tomorrow?
Go around, yeah.
I actually got lucky.
Step back. I keep walking back. You keep walking toward.
This is yeah. That was Dave the Iceman Ennis as he showed off his amazing lightsaber work, which I thought was pretty cool. Next up, we have what we're going to be seeing here is the the original video game that was first created and is in the Smithsonian Institute. One of the guests had one of the originals, and he allowed us, he did a full panel on it, allowed us to look at it and play it and everything else. So that is what we will be watching next. Hold on. Well,
hounds chasing the fox, right?
oops.
Now the hounds are slower. I need to be on that side.
Sorry, folks. I'm trying to produce
He gets kicked out of school.
and
He's
act
Jewish,
at the same time.
and he is.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the first video game ever.
He gets kicked out of school for being Jewish.
Ralph Bear.
And he is. Him and his family put in for a lottery to come to the U.S. and he's one of the few people that was accepted. And while he was on a boat coming to the U.S., Crystal Night happened, which is Crystal Night when all the Jewish businesses and synagogues and stuff were burnt to the ground. So he barely survived. So if he hadn't, video game history might be totally different, right? So he gets to America. He starts working for a factory at age 15, putting on buttons. He makes his first invention where he can make leather goods faster. And that's where he gets his idea for inventing. And then he's on a subway one day, and he sees an ad to be a radiotrician, which was a person that repairs radios. You know, now they're disposable, but back then they were expensive devices, and you fix them when they broke, not throw them out and buy a new one. So he takes a correspondence course, starts working on radios, and while he's doing that, he's learning other electronics, and eventually starts working for televisions. So he's designing a television in 1951, and he has the idea of, hey, let's build a game in the television. So he wants to put a checkers game in it. So in 1951 would have been the first video game, which would have been checkers. But he was running behind schedule on the TV. His boss said, no, just get the damn set done. And the idea of video games stayed dormant for another 15 years until 1966. And at this point, he's working for a military contractor called Sanders and Associates. And he's wanting to make these TV games, but Sanders is a military contractor. So he has to sell the pitch that this can be used to help train military personnel. And if you look at a lot of the early electronic video games, like the controllers and the technology, you know, the military had computers first and then universities, right? And they were the size of rooms, and they shrunk and micronized. But the joystick was originally resembling the flight stick from an airplane, right? So there's a lot of military technology is where video games came out of. He's working for a military contractor. He says, I want to try to make a game on a TV to help train some military people. So Sanders says, we're not sure we believe in this, but we'll give you $2,000 to start up and $5,000 in seed money for parts, which $2,500 doesn't sound, come on in. $2,500 doesn't sound like a lot of money in 1966, but in 1966, that's enough to buy a new car, right? Half of a house, it's a good chunk of money. Not a ton of money, but enough to get started. And they go through a series of making boxes you could hook to the TV. And that's not supposed to be on. They start making boxes to go TV, and they made a series of 7 of them. The first one would just put a dot on the screen, right, or a line. If you had an old television, depending on how your signal was, it would sometimes flip. Remember, you had vertical hold and horizontal hold on the back? Ralph Baer's realizing that you can control and make lines and squash images and manipulate it. Wouldn't it be fun to make a game? So at first they make a dot on the screen, and then do some other things. And they go through a series of these revisions, adding different functionality. They originally wanted to go through the cable companies because cable was new in America. And if you don't know where cable television came from, originally you have broadcast towers beaming out a TV signal, and the TV's there, but if there's a mountain or something in between, it blocks the signal and you can't get TV. So they started burying cables underground. That's where the term cable television came from, for people that live in mountainous areas to get signals. His idea was you could hook this box up to your TV and to your cable box, and the cable box would supply the background image. Because remember, imagery is very simple. There aren't ROM chips yet, right? It's all mechanical, like a light switch on, off, right? Or an old bread box with a light bulb and a battery running a cable through it. So they thought they could point a camera, like a picture of a hockey rink. That would be the background. You'd go to your TV through cable, and then you'd have the graphics on top of it. But then the cable industry hit a slump, and that didn't happen, so then they weren't sure what to do. But this is the original brown box. Now, you'll notice there's no cartridges because cartridges didn't exist yet. Though cartridges did come out of the military. We talked about things coming out of military, ammunition cartridges. That's the idea for video game cartridges. This has a series of switches on the front. Think a light switch, because in early electronics, before ROM chip technology, you had on and off. That's why computers used binary, 0 and 1, on, off, right? So you connected or you disconnected. So by moving these switches to different positions, you could get different combinations of graphics for this box. So this box was the 7th box, which was the final box made before they went into production. They call it the brown box because in a presentation, they took the shelf liner wood sticker and covered it, and it looks brown. If you remember anything about the 70s and late 60s, everything was wood, like wood paneling on the walls. Station wagon had wood on the side. So this was dressed up in wood, right? Which is funny because it's technology. Who thinks of wood for technology, right? That's kind of the opposite of technology. So if I put all these switches down, or all these switches up, and then we want to see what the very first game you could ever play on a TV was on this box. I go through here, and I push two down, 3 down, 4 down, and 10 down. And when I turn the power on, that's not right. Hold on. 2, 3, 4, and 10. Something is odd. Hold on here.
We would have had the first video checker game in 1951 if they hadn't been
Because I got up and down mixed up. That's why. Sorry.
so in a hurry.
Sometimes we don't have time to set up, right? 2, 4, and 10. Perfect. Now, what do you notice about this image on the screen? Remember, this is 1966. Color. It's in color. Early video games were in black and white. This prototype was made to work in color, but then when it went into production to save money, they made it in black and white because only the ultra wealthy and rich had color TVs at this time. You have to remember, in 1966, TVs were the 3rd most expensive thing anybody buys in their lifetime. You buy your house, then your car, and the 3rd most expensive thing you buy is a TV. They weren't cheap like they are today, right? If you remember your grandmother's TV, maybe in wood paneling like furniture, right? That's why it's a big spend. So, the original controllers, who of you had an Etch-a-Sketch as a kid? Didn't you hate how you had 2 dials, one that went horizontal, it made sense, move left, it goes left, move right, it goes right. But you take the other dial, and it goes up when you go to the right, and down when you go to the left, which doesn't make any sense, right? So you could never really draw what you wanted to draw because your brain was a little off. He was thinking, you have a horizontal goes across, and a vertical on the side. So when you go up, it goes up, and down, it goes down. Now, the very first game you could ever play on a TV was this, and it's called Chase. Who wants to play? Come on up. Everybody can have a chance, and we got different games. But this one, you're not going to be able to play and record at the same time. So if you want to record and let someone else play, you can play at the end afterwards. Okay. So someone else come up. So ignore the button that says English. We'll talk about that shortly. Okay. So this, stand a little to the right so people can see the TV. No, it won't go that far. Try not to trip on the speaker. Here. Step on the other side. There you go. So, the first game's obviously not complex, right? So this is a game of chase. So you move around and you decide who's chasing and who's not chasing. And you haven't figured that yet, but if you press your button, you'll pop back. Okay, so this was the first game that was ever done, and it was called Chase. And for the first time, hey, this is pretty cool, but after a while, it gets a little boring, right? So, who's chasing who?
Red dude. Well, I keep you.
And he's chasing you. Well, maybe you should chase him. So, are you amazed at how smooth it is? The controls on this,
They're in the zone.
the controls on this are analog, right? Analog dials, not digital like on-off. So, fast forward decades, Sony's coming out, they're advertising, oh, we got the first analog controller ever. No, that's not the case. This was originally analog. Okay, so this is a game, and that's great. Now, 2 more people come up here for a minute. Yeah, he's getting better. It flows pretty well. Okay, so 2, watch your step coming there. Hand it off to somebody else. So, the follow-up to this, actually, I'm going to hold one for a second to get started. So, push everything down.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.
Bring up button 2, button 3, and button and 4, and 10, and 7, and 10. Now, stand behind me just for a second until I get this going.
Okay, we're switching over to the next part. Trust me, that was an amazing thing to take part in.
Hounds chasing the fox, right? Now, the hounds are slower. I need to be on that side for a second. I'll give it back, I promise. You take that. So, he's 3 hounds, so you think he's got an advantage because he can outnumber me, right? Well, that's not the case, because he can't leave the screen. I can leave the screen, navigate off the screen, right? So I got an advantage. And I'm slightly faster. So he's trying, and almost got through you. So, and my daughter is like amazingly good at this, at weaving in between the foxes and stuff. But so now it's basically chase, but with foxes and with hounds.
Very nice.
And that was the second game that you could ever play on a TV. Push the button, you'll pop back in.
I noticed it's going back and forth rapidly, drawing the 3 white squares. It can't draw them all at the same time. Because I guess technology.
Yes, on these early games, and remember, these aren't programmed with read-only memory, okay? These aren't ROM cartridges. But when the early games started coming out, and it was on cartridges, like if you're programming for an Atari game, I've made some Atari games, you don't just program the code for the game. You have to control the horizontal lines of the television and program it to work with your game. So you have to program the refresh rate of the screen. It's pretty complex to be limited to 4K of memory, right? If you take the code of a typical Atari 2600 game, if you typed it up on a piece of paper, it'd take about 1.5 to 1.25 pages of text. So programmers like myself, when we learn to program in small places, not many people can program with small amounts of typed memory. So there weren't many people that could make video games at the time. And then technology got cheaper, memory got bigger, we all kind of lost our jobs, right? But everything's a cycle. And then the internet came out, right? And the internet originally paid by the minute, right? and people would dial up, you paid by, it was very expensive. So all of a sudden, all these companies that had websites wanted really good programmers that didn't waste any spaces, weren't junk programmers, because people were paying by the minute to download this stuff, right? And it was slow to transmit it. So we all got hired again, we were all important, right? And then technology gets cheaper, they start charging by the minute, right? Unlimited data, and we all kind of lose our jobs again. And then cell phones come out, right? Same thing, you pay by data with cell phones. So all of a sudden people that could program really tight again were like really important again, right? And now we have unlimited plans, and now my peers, well, the ones that are still alive, are sometimes aren't so hireable. So the next game, which brings you to what you brought up. So I put them all down.
That's me. That he was pointing to.
Does this look familiar?
Pong.
Okay, so Ralph Baer and Sanders eventually license this to Magnavox, and they're going to make a home video game system. But before it gets released, they're trying to figure out how to advertise the Magnavox video game system, because people have never played a video game before. It's totally foreign to them. So how do you do this? Well, we're going to have these little demonstrations in different parts of the country. We're going to advertise it in the newspaper. People come in, they can feel it and touch it, maybe build some hype about this brand new product that's a video game, right? So they have a showing in Burlington, California is one of their showing. I think it's the second one, demonstration. Nolan Bushnell, which later you'll learn was one of the co-founders of Atari, sees the ad, and he's thinking, he used to work on the Midway. He used to go to college and would program and work on the big mainframe computers. And he actually gambled his college money away, and he couldn't afford to go back to college. So then he started working on a Midway, like arcade, like a fair type of thing, target shooting type of devices, and like the things you see at the carnival games and such. And he's thinking, how cool would it be to have these video games on the computers, on these mainframes, on location at places like this? But of course it was cost prohibitive. Well, now a decade's passed by, technology's gotten cheaper. He sees this he hears about this demonstration, goes to check it out, and he says, hey, technology has finally caught up with the dream that I had a decade or so ago, right? So he starts up a company. It was originally called Syzygy, was the original name for Atari, but it turned out that name was already being used by a roofing company, of all things. If you don't know what a syzygy is, it's a word for the alignment of three planets that make a straight line. Like we had Jupiter and Mars and Saturn, and they're all in a straight line. That's called a syzygy. Why you name your roof company after that? I don't know. Yes, sir.
Is that where the 3 lines in Atari come from?
It doesn't, but I like the way you're thinking. Maybe it does, and he's never said anything, but I don't know. But the 3 lines on the Atari logo come from the ball 1, 2, 3. It's the stretching of that. People call it the Fuji logo because it looks like Mount Fuji, because everybody thinks Atari was a Japanese company, but it wasn't. It was an American company. But people think it's a Japanese company because the word Atari, in the 60s and 70s, there was a Japanese game that was really popular. So the oldest board games of all time was called Go. And they used to play that on campus before he got kicked out of college. And just like when you play the game chess, you have terms like checkmate, right? Well, in the game of Go, there's certain terms to the game. There's Sente, there's something else, and there's Atari. So when they go to the copyright office to use the name Syzygy, it's already taken. There's a lady behind the desk who says, we're really into Go. Here's these 3 Go terms. Which do you like best? And the lady picks Atari, and the rest is history. So Ted Dabney and Nolan Bushnell start up Atari. They go to this demonstration. Nolan Bushnell goes to this demonstration. At this point, he's working for a company called Ampex. That's the company that made the first VHS tape. Okay, so it's a technology company. They go to this demonstration. They see this, which you're going to see in a second when we play it, plays a lot like Pong, right? And says, hey, that's good. Now my dream of bringing these games to the Midway could happen. And they basically steal it and make Pong. So he pulls in a programmer from Ampex. He was an intern named Al Alcorn. Al Alcorn, he really wanted Al Alcorn to make a driving game, but Al Alcorn's fresh. He's just out of college, doesn't know what he's really doing. So he says, why don't you make this ball and paddle game first, right? And then we'll go to the driving game. And Al does a couple changes on it. He makes the ping sound, the Pong sound, because this doesn't have any audio, right? It's too early for audio. And then he put on a deflection depending on where the ball hits the paddle. because the technology isn't capable of doing that at this point. So 2 people come up here that haven't played yet. Everybody will get a chance afterwards. So for this, we're just going to use the vertical to go up and down, okay? And when I push the button, yeah, sorry it's not the best setup.
No, you're good. I just didn't want to be in your way.
That's fine. So when you press, whoa, okay, we're going to make a little changement here. So on the back, I have a ball speed dial. Push your button that's on the bottom left. Yes. See, that's slow. And I can speed it up with this dial on the back. So we'll start it slow because you all are. So now, this is his version of tennis, right? Nolan Bushnell sees this, copies it, and makes Pong. And it goes to court, and he gets clobbered, and that's another story. But what's funny is, for years, Nolan Bushnell and Ralph Baer kind of fought about this, and Nolan denied. He denied, I did not go to this demonstration. I did not see this. We thought this on our own independently. And for about 15 or so years, he repeated and parroted this story. And then the guest book from the event was found. And in the guest book was Nolan Bushnell's signature along with 2 other Ampex employee signatures. So at that point, then Nolan changes his story and says, well, I saw it, but it was made by an engineer and not a game designer, and it wasn't fun, so we added the angle and the Pong sounds and made it better. Now, so right now it's boring, it just goes across, right? But you see this English button? There's an English dial. After you hit the ball, I'll slow it down so they can see it. Should be going slow. Someone push a button to launch it again. Now, use that English button. You can make it go up and down. You control the wavelength. So that's supposed to be like English on a ball. So if you play tennis or if you play soccer, you can kind of hit the ball on a spin so it kind of goes out and comes back in. That's called English. So because the technology couldn't do a deflection, it has an English button. Now you're thinking you have 2 hands and 3 dials. That's kind of hard, right? So you're doing it. It's hard now going slow. Now, how about if I speed it up? Yeah. So Nolan had a point that, yes, it's made by an engineer and not by a game designer. But at this point, there aren't game designers, right? So I'm going to slow it down. Okay, so that's not a bad speed. So when you all are tired of playing, you can let someone else up, and I'm just going to keep talking. So what other games are on here? This is not a real gun. Nobody get scared. This was the first light gun, but this gun wasn't engineered. Ralph went to Kmart, bought a toy gun. That's right. Kids used to play with these things. Put a light photosensitive sensor in here and made a light gun game. Now, we're not going to hook this up, but you can obviously, if I change it to a light gun game, there's no AI to move the target on its own. Someone has a joystick and moves the ball around while the other shoots at it. So, have you ever played Duck Hunt on the Nintendo?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know when you fire how the screen flashes?
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why it does that, okay? When you're playing a video game, a TV is 24 frames per second. A tube television like this, a cathode ray tube TV is 24 frames a second. When you're playing a game, you only shoot, it's got to register for, it needs to know, this detects light going into the barrel. That's why it doesn't work on the LCD. Right, or a projector, because you need light shooting into the barrel of the gun for it to be recognized. Well, if I shot it now, it's going to always come as a hit. So when you play Duck Hunt or a game like this, for a few frames, it drops to a black screen and just puts up a light dot wherever a duck or whatever your target is. And that's what's read by this. It syncs with the gun when you pull the trigger. As soon as the trigger goes back out, it goes back to full color again. That's why you see that kind of flashing. It's not for a full second, it's for a few frames of 24 frames a second, right? And that's how light guns work. So the first light gun game was actually engineered for the brown box. This also has volleyball, 1, 4, and 12, which is pretty much like Pong, except now the ball will get stuck at the line. Yes, sir?
Hi, were there any critiques at the time that looked like a real gun? Because when I look at like the Nintendo gun, it looks like a hobbyist toy.
I'm older than I look. But did you know that a few years before me, we would go to school with our guns? and they would teach us gun safety, how to clean your gun, how to aim it. You take it to school. I joke about the students with the rifle rack on the back of their truck. That was common at the time, right? You didn't have. Well, we're not going down this political debate. But it was a different, because I teach for Canisius and Villa, my students are blown away when they find out that the students would bring their guns to school and use them. So no, it wasn't at all.
They were real guns?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
How old are you? I'm surprised you weren't one of them.
I'm 55.
Oh, you're my age. Okay, so yeah.
But I
About
never
five
heard
more people 5 years older than us were bringing their guns to school, and they were taught to respect them, how to clean them, how to aim them. You know.
I've never heard of that. Wow.
I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I'm a historian. Okay, so nobody shoot me. So they sell this idea to Magnavox, and Magnavox says, okay, we're going to make this game system. The original name for the first home video game, believe it or not, this is so horrible, thank God they changed it. Got 2 hyphens in it. The Skill-O Vision. Skill-O, Skill-Vision. Ralph Baer hated this name, but they had stole the technology, so he couldn't do anything about it, right? But at the last minute, they changed it to the Odyssey. And some people have speculated that it was because what's the famous movie producer that made the book 2001? There's a book, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then Kubrick, I think, made the movie.
Stanley Kubrick.
Some people have reported that
Arthur C. Clarke, you mean?
Arthur C. Clarke wrote the book, yes.
Right.
So some people have reported that that's where the idea for Odyssey came from. Ralph says he never heard that story, but I do see it parroted. It may be true, it may not. So look at this. Don't you wish that your video game systems came in nice plastic cases with handles? So, when the first video game system comes out, people never played video games before, right? So the idea of these abstract games don't really exist. The first thing that happens, we'll pass these around. This is a system. And here's the controller. You'll notice that the English dial is now inside the other one. So now you can get to all dials with one hand. So that's an engineering improvement. Now you'll notice there's a cartridge slot in the front. It doesn't take cartridges. ROM chips don't exist yet. These are like breadboards. If you ever had a 4-H projector in school where you had a light bulb and a battery, and you run the wire to it, and the light bulb would light up, you let go, it comes off, that's on-off, right? It's a signal, right? So these are basically keys. Instead of having these switches that are odd and hard to do and kind of confusing, you could put these in, and they would either open or close certain circuits to unlock certain games, okay? So it looks like a cartridge, but it's not. But this is where the idea of the cartridge came from, other than the military aspect for the cartridge. Now, remember, the brown box was in color. When Magnavox releases the Odyssey, not the Skill-O-Vision, they said to get the price down, they made it black and white. Now, at this time, there were only 2-size televisions sold in the U.S. and most parts of the world. We're used now, we get all these different sizes, 10-inch, 13-inch, 26, 24, whatever, right? Big screens. This time or 2. So, to make the game in color, the games came with overlays. Now, I grew up in the South, and the problem in the South is we have a lot more bugs in the South. And as a kid, the bugs would fly, and they'd land on your TV, and they couldn't fly off because the static electricity would keep them there. And my job, as my father would call me, the fly swatter, and I have to come over and shoo the flies off the screen. Well, that's how these overlays would stay on your screen with static electricity, right? So now the light shines through, and here, this is for a football game, right? But I got, a dozen different overlays, which then added screen. Now remember, this was originally supposed to go through cable, right? But the cable deal fell through, so they had these little plastic overlays. But the games, remember, these are foreign concepts. It's a lot for people to grasp. So most of the games are based off of board games. So not only did you get this electric device, but the device came with 2 dies. Came with stickers. These are still unused from 1972.
Wow.
Right? There's educational games and different types of games. Here's a flyer with some trivia questions about states and capitals. Here's a football board. On the other side, there's a bingo board, right? There's a bingo game.
That looked
There's a little, because it's not advanced enough to keep score, it's got these little dials, right? You turn the dials, you keep your football score for the games. You got all these different pamphlets. You got maps. And then, just like other board games, you have cards for the games. You got chips for some of the games. You got play money. This might be the only complete odyssey in the world. Like, there's not a dollar bill. Like, it's got every component. I mean, there's hundreds of them, right? So to find this in the wild, there's another set of cards. Here's cards for another game, cards for another game. So it was kind of merging the two together. Does that make sense? So at this point, does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Going back here, other patents pending. Do you have any idea what some of the other patents would have been pending at the time for that?
For that, I don't know. He had 120 patents. Bear had over 120 patents accepted. He did video gambling patents. Ralph Bear's did a lot of things. Like, he's known. His biggest thing is Simon. You know, with the game with the four colors.
Yes.
He developed Simon, which is funny because remember how Nolan Bushnell stole Pong from his tennis game? Atari had a game called Touch Me. It had four colors with four buttons, and it made these really awful sounds.
Oh, no.
Ralph Baer saw this, and he's still a little disgruntled about them taking Pong, right? So he creates Simon, which is basically Touch Me, but in a dial mode with nice harmonic sounds and big glowing lights, and it becomes the #1 Christmas toy that year, and they're still making them, right? So he kind of gets a little bit of revenge there. I mean, he never sees any of the money, right, because he's a contractor. But he made some of the G.I. Joe toys. Sorry, I need some water. Infrared, where you could shoot at the vehicle and the doors would pop off, right?
I have water, but I drank from it.
That's okay. So he worked on a camera that went to the moon, which you think doesn't seem that complex, except remember the camera goes from extreme cold to extreme heat, depending if it's in the shadow or the sun on the moon, because there's no atmosphere, right? So he worked on a handle apparatus for it and some other things. But basically, that's that. Any other questions? Who wants to play? Listen, this thing, touch it, get your picture with it while you can, because I don't bring it out very often. If you want to play it, please do. I recommend playing the Fox and the Hounds because I think that's the best of the game.
How do you switch with square and switch?
You change controllers.
Shannon, let me get your picture with it.
Let me get all these. Let me get this set up first.
And we're back. I found that to be fascinating, particularly the part about how the video games were stolen between one person and another. I was also told that Space Battle was one of the original, or Space Wars maybe, was one of the original video games to come out too. So there seems to be some confusion there. But everyone, even though it's been proven wrong now, everyone thinks of Pong as the first video game. But I would love to do, and I may do a show on the history of video games and how they've changed. I mean, in the 80s, they had a thing called video arcades that you could just go into and play a game, any number of games. But that kind of died out. I don't know why. I mean, I can remember at least 3 of them within walking distance of each other up in Crystal Beach, not counting what was in the park. And there were at least a couple within walking distance of my house on Hurdle Avenue. I believe one of them was called Great Games. But, and here you had your typical 80s games like Missile Command and Mooncrest and Pac-Man, you know, Space Invaders, all the classic video games. But that kind of died out after the 80s. I don't know if it was home systems that put an end to arcades. I mean, every mall had a real video arcade. But I mean, now malls are even dying out. But basically, the only place you see video arcades now are in entertainment centers like I'd have like say the Putt Putt area here in Buffalo, theme parks. Believe it or not, movie theaters and hotels actually have arcades. Although with the hotels, it's not as much anymore. But for those malls that do that have survived, actually have gaming centers in them. Like the Galleria has a huge one, a couple of them, and Erie, the Eastern Hills Mall still has an interesting video game type place in there, but they're more like restaurants and areas where you can, bar area, So it becomes kind of a adult playground type thing, as opposed to in the old days when you would go into a building and basically all you do is play video games. Unfortunately, and I hate to bring up the fact that this was done, but it was part of history. Somehow people discovered that using some kind of piece of metal, I'm not exactly sure what the metal was because it was the 80s, a long time ago, they would pound it against the games and it would somehow activate the video games without having to put money in it. Exactly why or how, I don't know. I haven't thought about it in years, but I have to admit, I would, if anybody does know, please let me know, because email me at observer1232000@yahoo.com, because I really would like to know how that situation actually worked itself in the 80s. But Atari and things like Bally were popular during the 80s. Atari didn't have a lot of memory, I have to say, because if you looked at their Donkey Kong, they had two boards, and you'd go between the two boards. If you look at Tron, it was nothing like the arcade game, the home version. A lot of, even to today, theme parks have video games, but some of them are so sophisticated that you're using, like, you're getting on a motorcycle, or you're in a total environment cockpit or something to that effect. And trying to make home video games that match the arcade games back then was not easy, especially when they started coming out with the more elaborate games that were in 3D, kind of like Zaxxon. Or I remember an arcade across the street from my grandmother's house. I mean, like, they were all over back then. You had all kinds of different types of classic games that you don't see a lot of now unless you're on a retro system. I mean, they had some great, you gotta love this weather, folks. It is freezing out there. and I guess there's some snow headed our way. But I mean, as time went on, games developed to the point where home video games looked better than anything you'd see in the arcades. And you know, I remember the Boulevard Mall used to have a wonderful arcade, but yeah, now there's not really much of a Boulevard Mall left. And the Regal on Elmwood and the one at the Galleria both have video games there, mini arcades, you know, so they are still around, just not in the way they were back then. And some of these games are still enduring to today, like Berserker or Space Invaders, or even something simple like Haunted House, which is why a lot of conventions have retro video game rooms, which I've spent time in. But when home computers became popular, then advanced games began to take over, where you basically they were adventures, and you know, almost like which way books. You know, do you do this or do you do that? You know, and you know, things like Transylvania and Kidnapped, which was actually made by Apple. I think Transylvania was made by either Commodore or by Apple. I can't remember. But Zork, the ever popular one, these were adventure games. And now you can get those you can download a lot of those adventure games onto your phone now. I mean, let's face it. Video games are getting better and better, and they're getting huger and huger. I mean, at the Galleria, we have a Connect 4 game that's basically a huge board, and you're touching buttons, and, you know. So simple games are getting makeovers, basically, to fit into the modern day. And home video game systems are easy to obtain, relatively cheap. But handheld games, you know, which were popular, like the football games, the basketball games and stuff, which were popular during the 80s and 90s as well. And here you are with Sega Genesis and, you know, slowly moving up to what we have today. And if you'd seen the video game room at LilCon, I mean, you had some very sophisticated graphics in some of these games. Wrestling, superhero fighting, you know. I really think that once we get around to inventing an actual holodeck, like on Star Trek or other sci-fi shows, we're going to have some really nice games to play. But until then, I think virtual reality is what's moving on more than anything else. We have cracked the first 4 levels of virtual reality, and we're hopefully going to crack the 5th one sometime down the line. First one being your TV set, second one being video games, third one being simulators, and fourth one being cyberspace, with the helmets and the gloves and everything. The 5th one will be total immersion of your senses, which means you'll be able to smell, taste, touch, and feel like you're actually inside the game. I know there have been many movies about it and everything else, and I think VR might be our future. You know, and it gives them the opportunity to sell the gloves and the helmets and the mats you got to walk on and stuff like that. So, all right. Well, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here for my video game show and other things. I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. I want to thank LilCon for providing me with the footage, and Mark Miller. And I just want to say, check out, you know, the Festival of Trees will be this weekend on Sunday at the Convention Center downtown Buffalo. Festival of Lights is happening at Erie County Fair grounds, and there are many other great Christmas activities out there. So happy holidays to everyone from the Observer, Sal Monaco, and happy holidays.